Hello and welcome to Great Train Layouts Live. I'm your host, Nick Ozrak, and thank you for joining me on this evening. If you're joining us live or if you're joining the replay, well, then thank you for joining us whenever you're choosing to watch this. Today, we're trying something new on Great Train Layouts Live, and I am hearing myself, which means I need to mute myself. Thank you for joining me on this evening if you're joining us live. And would it be a great Train Layouts Live if I wasn't having some kind of audio issue? But at least this time I know my microphone's working. Usually that proves to be the issue. Gonna increase the music there. So, what are we doing today? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are using Trainz Z. We are still in Trainz with a Z 19. But we're not using it tonight for building a route. Instead, we're using it for researching what we want to build. And that happens to be the BC Rail Tumbler Ridge subdivision. Branch line, I think it's technically a branch line. So, what is the Tumbler Ridge? So in the early 1980s, there was interest in the British Columbian government, along with some Japanese interest, to explore new mining opportunities, coal mining opportunities in the very remote areas of British Columbia. So that resulted in the construction of the Tumbler Ridge line. I feel like there could probably be a rounding count tonight for how many times I stumble across the word Tumbler Ridge. Because of the mountainous nature of the line, it required building tunnels, and they decided rather than having to invest in complex and expensive ventilation systems, that they were going to make the line electric. So it's basically a coal conveyor of a railroad. It ran with electrics from about 1984 till 2000. And then all of the locomotives for the purpose were scrapped, except for our lead unit today, number 6001, still survives at a museum in British Columbia near Prince George, I believe. So, hello to Kevin, hello to Nancy. Thank you both for joining us tonight. So, what we are, this was one that there's two reasons why this kind of struck my fancy as far as why I thought it'd be a good one to make a layout of, because I haven't seen anybody do a layout specific to this. So I thought, what better opportunity to introduce the concept of designing a layout before we figure out the track plan, than to do it with you guys tonight and to do it using the sim. So the two things that kind of got me inspired by this. Number one is this, I was at a hobby store, and I picked up a bunch of old issues of magazines that they were giving away, including this one with good old 6001. This is the May 1988 edition of Railfan and Railroad magazine. And it has two articles on the Tumbler Ridge sub with a bunch of black and white photos. And a couple of color ones in there that covers the operations and how you would rail fan it. And boy, it's interesting reading rail fanning tips from a 1988 article that's talking about where you could get your nearest film supplies and so forth, and obviously a pre-GPS age. But some great photos and some great information about how the railroad was running in the late 80s. So that was one inspiration. And then, coincidentally, recently for Trainz Z, this creator, Matt Fleming, released a bunch of his assets. He's been working on this project for years, and he's decided to kind of sideline it because he's gotten busy in life, but he released everything for free that he's done up to at this point. If you Google search Trainz with a Z, Tumbler Ridge, you should be able to find the link to his stuff. It's buried within the official forums. But that includes these lovely, oh golly, what is the GF6C? I always get it. Yes, GF6C. I'm starting to get that designation memorized that GMD, GF6C, electric locomotive, 6,000 horsepower, each of these. Now, what you may notice about this route is it is incomplete. So what he did is he imported the terrain data for the entirety of the route, and as well as laying the track. He didn't get to any of the scenery as far as trees and landscape. So it is a very colorful landscape. But why are we here tonight? Why are we still looking at this when it's in this state? Because in a way, stripping away all the trees and all the scenery is going to help us to figure out what makes for an interesting track plan. Because obviously, in terms of like really honing this in and starting to do the construction of the train layout, we'll do the conventional photo research. Like we have reference photos in here. There's reference photos online. There's actually quite a few videos online. If you search Tumbler Ridge, you'll find a number of videos of the operation of it. I need to turn down the music. It's a little bit loud on my end. So there's a good amount of material out there, but nothing beats being able to be in the train simulator and actually looking around at all the different angles and figuring out what are the key scenes and what are the ways in which the track geometry shapes. We're designing this for N scale. The reason I settled on N scale is because this is a lot of bulk trains moving from point A to point B. There's not a lot of switching, and the prototypical length of coal trains is 98 cars. As you can see here, this is the very end of the loop, or a very end of the line. This is Quinmont, which is a coal loader. So the coal loader would be right about here and hanging over the tracks. So this is a 98 car train, which is already really big in N scale. We'll measure it when we get to a straight section of track, and we can see exactly how long it is. But in the interest of being able to get these big scenes in this big landscape, I feel like it's worth going N scale on this design to be able to get the scope of that. And we'll see what we can do as far as train length wise. So tonight we're going to be taking a ride, going end to end, which is about 80 miles. We might be using a little bit of the fast forward button to kind of skip some of the in-between bits that are less exciting. We don't need to analyze every single mile. What we're going to be doing is looking for what are the key scenes, what are the key angles to those scenes, what do they look like from the map, and kind of I'll be taking notes. And then after the stream, I'll be coming up with the track plan. Now, what space is this going into? It's going into a fictional space. I'm designing this. I'm basically designing a room for the layout, which does seem like, well, couldn't then you do whatever size you want? And that's true, but I'm kind of trying to have in my mind that it's going to be like a 30-foot by 20-foot basement layout, double layer. I want it to be a practical design, because obviously I can make this however big I want. I mean, we've got the full size thing here. So this is treating it as if we had a basement, how we're going to do it. So I am very eager to get underway with you guys tonight, and do let me know if you like this format. Obviously, some of the other routes that we see are going to have more scenery than this, so if the kind of sparseness of the scenery is a turnoff, do let me know. But hopefully you find my commentary interesting as we look at the key components of what makes this real-life route great that we're going to make into a great train layout. And I should also take a brief moment to highlight the fact that Great Train Layouts now has a website. I know I've been saying this for months and months and months. GreatTrainLayouts.com. You can go there. You can see all the videos I've done, live streams, the What Makes This Layout Great episodes. You can go to GreatTrainLayouts.com. They're there. We have routes for download right now. The Conrail P&L secondary, Rudy Garbley and Carolyn Hoffman's HO layout that we did on a couple of live streams, that is available for download there, so you could go there and download that. And all of the other routes that we're covering at some point are going to be available for download on Great Train Layouts loadout.com. And if you want to reach out to me because you wish to simulate your layout, you want to be able to pre-visualize it before you get to work on the scenery or get to work on the design, we do take commissions, and you can check that out. There's a link in the description of this video. I'm so happy to say we got the website up. Okay, before we get underway, a couple of you have already contributed super chats, and I thank you so much for that. So First Pacific Productions, I wonder if there's a New York Central subway track that you could do in one of these live streams. That would be pretty interesting. I'd love to do something subway oriented. I mean, I think a lot of people don't do subways because so much of it is, well, below ground. But maybe something that kind of goes above and below. It's not often done. And maybe that's something we'd come up with as a design. And Nancy Dreamer, thank you very much for supporting the show as well. Okay, so let us get our great journey underway. This is the very eastern end of the route, which is... And I'm going to have to refer to the map in here because I'm still learning this route myself. This is the very end. This is, not Quinnamont. This is Quinnet. This is the Quinnet loadout. So there's two loadouts on the Tumbler Ridge line. One is Tech, which we're going to pass very soon, and this is Quinnet. So this is one of the ways in which this route already is lending itself to being a train layout. It's got a built-in reverse loop at the very end of the line. I mean, it doesn't get much easier as far as turning it into a model than, hey, you've got a reverse loop. And it's interesting to note how that reverse loop is already... I've got my pen in hand. I was going to bring up Photoshop, but this will be easier. That reverse loop pretty much is the entire length of the train. And obviously, if you have questions, comments, suggestions as we go, I encourage you to leave them in the chat, and then we can make this a group discussion design. So, with that said, let's get underway. So what's interesting about these locomotives, as a sort of work in progress deal, they have horn, they have bell, they don't have engine sounds. Except for that air compressor. But it works. We're going to turn that down a bit. Actually, we're going to turn that down a fair amount because that is a bit loud. So, this is where the empty trains come in, and they just loop around at about 1.5 miles per hour and load out on the train. Oh, New York Central Subway, New York City Subway. Yeah. And I should know better. I was just in New York City. Down the volume on that. So yes, this isn't one obvious end of the route, and we're gonna just kind of get up to speed and underway here because we don't need to simulate the loading when there's nothing to really look at here. But simply to say, this is obviously one end of the line. So we're gonna get our train up to speed. Track speed on this line was about 35. I'd have to double check. We'll treat it like 40 because I'm going to be fast forwarding a bit anyway. Fast forwarding, what that means is I hold down the shift button. You can see the train speed is still consistent. But we've got that in there just so that way we're able to skip the in-between bits. Because the reason we're running the train is really so that we can kind of see how the train looks in the landscape. And that's something you can't do even with Google Maps. I mean, we could be looking at a top-down view of this on Google Maps, and you could see how it looks from the air. But part of this exercise is to see what makes for interesting scenes. I feel like this S-curve, like even this S-curve coming out of the loader, because this is kind of a square element as it is. So that is probably a nice way to transition from the loader into the main a transition. I envision a lot of this layout's going to be maybe like a foot wide because we're talking end scale and we're talking. It's very much just keeping to the central line at hand. There's not a lot of reason to need to model too much one way or another. There's no big lakes or anything like that. So let's set the switch ahead, and it's already locked. So we'll stop it so that we can actually change the switch, and we can change the switch, and we can get back underway. Potato Head writes, Nick, the route came with some catenary, but it's not up at all. Maybe you can use that for the model railroad. Yes, and if I'm not mistaken, yes, there is catenary. So it doesn't have any catenary installed. Obviously, the final, when we're building the train layout, because we are going to do that as a future live stream, we'll put the catenary up. It's definitely going in there. So, yeah, it's a little bit weird to see these electrics without... Oh, I guess we should even put the pantographs up just to say that we did. There we go. That makes all the difference. Now we've got the pantographs up. Pacific Productions. You could probably do the 7 train line in New York City. That's mostly above ground except for a few stations in Manhattan, Terminus, and Flushing. I'd be open to that. I would be open to that. I mean, I'd be interested to see what modelers have done for subway systems or elevated systems. Because I've often looked at the Chicago elevated and thought that would be a good contender. Okay. A lot of this area is just forest and not much else. So we're going to fast forward this bit here because there's not really much remarkable. We do have... Okay, we've got a couple of crossings here. I'm not sure if these are public crossings or mine, but I think that anytime that you have a crossing, you're giving your engineer a chance to use the horn prototypically. So we'll make note of that we've got 2 grade crossings, and I'm just going to put... I'll show you what I'm writing. My notes here. Just little X's of like, hey, here's a grade crossing, here's another. Because obviously it can come back into the sim and refine it further. But I'm just sort of trying to make the highlights of like, what are the things that are standing out to me. So yeah, this is I've encountered a lot of different coal conveyor routes in my musings online and learning about different railroads. A lot of them I find to be... It's tricky. The challenge with coal conveyor routes is that there's usually not much else to them. So, like, this railroad here hauled coal, and that was it. There was no other major on-line side industry. No timber product, nothing else. So, in a way, it's great to be modeling it in the sim because it's like, I don't know if I'd ever want to model something that's so specific traffic-wise, because you do run into the potential problem that it could get stale. I mean, if you're just running the same power and you're just running coal trains. Now, obviously, one could have some fun with this and make it a little bit more dynamic. You could say, oh, maybe there's a timber industry, so maybe logs are coming in and lumber's going out or something like that. And that's the beauty of model railroading, is that you can expand on these base ideas of what the prototype did and take it further. So there's other railroads I've encountered, like the Deseret Railroad, the Black Powell and Mesa Lake. I'm going off of memory on that one. But there's a couple of U.S. side railroads that are electric, hauling coal from a mine to a power plant. Deseret is the main one that I could think of. And that's... I think the challenge even with doing a layout off of that is that sets always stay the same. Like, there's no interchange, there's no coupling, uncoupling. Like, it's an isolated railroad. At least here, the BC Rail... These coal trains interchange with CN. So Canadian National would bring the coal in from, or bring the hoppers in from Prince George or Prince Rupert? Prince George, I want to say. Um, they'd interchange with the electrics. The electrics would take them to the loadouts and then bring them back. So we've got some interchange. We've got a lot of opportunities for. We have a lot of opportunities to do meets. You'll see that there's, as we go further west, there's going to be some passing sidings. So even though, yes, it is just coal, I think there's ways in which we can. You could expand on this base idea, and if you wanted to throw in timber or wanted to throw in some switching or make it a bridge line, then you could. Black Mesa and Lake Powell. Thank you. I had all the words. I just wasn't sure what order they were in. Okay, actually, this is a good spot right here. We're going to measure the length of this train. And here's how we're going to do it. Can we get it all in this straight? We could get it close enough. There's a better spot later. We'll come back to that thought. Okay, so is that a bridge that No, this is just a ledge. I mean, it's a cool ledge. But this is all essentially just forested stuff. Now, this is a neat view. How much could you see the river in real life through the trees? I'm not certain on that one. But I'm going to write a note that says ledges. So we've got the track, and then I'm going to put ledge. Because really, this is, it's not geographically specific. Like, when we're translating this to a layout, like, there are specific curves, but so much of layout design is just a snaking of a line anyway. So I'm imagining that from a staging, from that the orientation of you looking at the layout is this. So you're looking at the ledge, looking up at the train. In fact, I mentioned that I see this as a double deck layout, so I would say that probably this might be the upper deck. I'm not convinced of that point. I'm not entirely convinced of that point. Pacific Productions. There are some good MTA subway cars on the DLS made by user Magic Land. Texture still looks decent and has custom cab views. As I say, I would definitely give some thought to. I mean, my problem is I don't know much about the real New York Central. There I go again. New York City, subway system. Let alone how they operated, so forth. If somebody came, if you can find a plan, if you can find a track plan and send it to me, of something that either is the subway system or could be turned into that would be really helpful, because I just don't have a lot of knowledge of it. And I feel like I'd have to give a lot of thought as to like how one would do a subway system as a layout. I think it could be done. I think it'd be interesting to figure out. I like this scene here with the river at the bottom of the ledge. I don't know if that would be seen because I feel like it'd be so toward the top and the river's really far down. But it's a possibility. I'm going to put river as a note. But, even if we had to compress it and raise the river up a bit to get it closer to the track, I think that could be a nice way to have some visual diversity, because the key is making it not all just boring mountain and tree. Now, if this is the first, what I would call money shot scene right here. This is the Murray Bridge. This is actually and this is the actual bridge model here that Matt created, that you can see here. There's a nice shot in this magazine, and I'll try to bring it up here while we're waiting for the train to arrive. You can see a train crossing the bridge. So this is unquestionably something that we would want to incorporate because it's a focal point. It's something that appears in photographs. There's no doubt about it. Now, I'm inclined, based on the way the track naturally does this S curve, to make the scenic vantage point on this side. It seems like people photographed it from this side, but I don't think it would be any. I think it's so similar that let's just say it would be modeled from this side. So let's get ourselves lined up for that money shot while I'm making my note here, and then you get to see what that would look like. Blair Smith, the maintenance shops were between the Murray River and the Wolverine River. This is where the pushers were stored. Yep, we're going to be coming up on that in just a moment right here. Seems like you have good knowledge of the railroad. So yes, as Blair pointed out, we are coming up on another unquestionable feature of what we would want to have in there, and that is the Murray shop. So this is where the railroad serviced the electric locomotives. And as modeled here, it has just the one track. I think at some point there's a second spur that comes off this way. I'm going to need to research that a little bit more to figure that one out. There's a nice video I've seen on Facebook of somebody pacing a train along this road right here. So I kind of... This is an interesting one, and this is why it benefits looking at it in the sim, because it lends it... If we're continuing with the geography of heading west, then we're going to orient it this way. But scenically, it kind of looks better this way, because you're putting the shops in the back. I mean, and you have this mountain here, which serves as a nice backdrop. I feel like we have to orient it the other way, though. I feel like putting it on this side just makes more sense. Just because that way, then you could have the river in the backdrop, and we don't have to change the geography. Kevin says I'm streaming at the same time as Approach Medium. Oh, that, well, completely unintentional. Hope you stick around for this one, or just... I don't know if you have two monitors. I've got two monitors. Put me up on one, put him up on another. So yes, this is definitely another one of those must-include scenes, because it adds another layer of operational interest. So I had my helpers on all the way. I've already attached my helpers, but it sounds like I think the helpers were stored here, and this is where they would be cut on to the train. If I understand what Blair's saying, right? Again, I need to research this element of the operations a bit more, but it doesn't change the fact that we want this scene in here no matter what. So, from here, there's another bridge here, so we'll mark that as a thing. This isn't one that I'm familiar with, so I don't know if we'd find ourselves having to include it. So let's have a... Oh, well, we're about to come to the next kind of big scenic element anyway. And that is going to be the tech loadout. T-E-C-K, not T-E-C-H. Looks like one more smaller river bridge here, so I'm going to put deep. And then we're going to put narrow. Now, two different loadouts. Earlier we saw Quinette, and now this is Tech. Same idea. You've got it's just a giant reverse loop. Again, this route is begging to be modeled, and that's only going to be more true as we head further west. You're going to see things where it's like, Well, of course, this has to be a train layout, even if it's only a virtual, uh, even if it's only a virtual train layout. I'd love to see somebody make it real, but I admit, like, even where I find this is cool, it's just like I think part of the challenge with modulated electrics is you're gonna have to love it because you're always going to be running under the wires. Now, in the train layout version that I'm gonna make, we can do the Photoshop layers thing where the catenary will all be one layer. So if you want to run stuff without wires, you can take that off. But uh, but you can't do that in real life. If only you could do Photoshop layers with the train layout in real life, that would be much better. Um, Back in the heyday, it was the Bull Moose loadout. They trucked the coal from the mine north of there to the loadout. Oh, so yes, so you could see here's where the road comes. So the trucks would presumably be dumping their coal here, gets conveyed up to the silos, and then dumped onto the train underneath. Sounds like you know what you're talking about, Blair. Appreciate you joining us tonight to fill us in on these things because I fully confess I'm still learning the ins and outs of this. For me, this is I don't know about you guys. For me, I get captivated on these sort of oh, what's that? That looks cool. Let me do something with that kind of tangents, and that's what this is. But I think that it's sort of interesting to take something that I've never seen a track plan of before and figure out a track plan. Uh, Joey the cat, we could use a Bessemer Lake Erie route for trades. That is absolutely true. Approach medium, not approach medium. Appalachian Railroad Modeling, the who did the Lake Erie, Franklin, and Clarion track plan that I covered on what makes this layout great. He's done a number of different Bessemer track plans, and there's one in particular I have my eye on that would be Conneaut to Albion with the hogback, because yes, we need Bessemer in the sim. Um, so that's something I'd like to do in the future. And I think what's nice about doing these train Z layouts is like, yes, some of you may be looking at this and going, well, Nick, why don't you just do here's the dem, why not just do the full thing? Because it would take me years to do this. And it takes hours to play it. And sometimes there's something to be said about getting that bite-sized piece of getting your operations in and out in 15 minutes, half hour, maybe a couple of hours with something like this. But I think it's nice to have that sort of bite-sized experience. This is where we're going to measure the train because we've got this really long tangent. So we're going to fast forward to get the train up to the front here. And Dylan says we also need DM and IR. Yes, and I actually just purchased a book on the Misabi, so expect me to go on some iron ore mine tangent in the not too distant future. Now here's something we're going to do here, and actually I'm going to go back to Quinnette and show you the advantage of it there too. We're going to switch into Surveyor, which I think it's loading. Yes, there we are. Okay. Because one of the advantages of working in the sim is that we can actually measure the route in N scale. So rather than measuring it on Google Maps and having to do conversions, we could just say, okay, pretend that this whole thing is N scale. Now tell me how long it is from from locomotive to locomotive. This is a fully loaded full drag of 98 cars, 2 engines on the front, 2 engines on the back. And there's our answer. It is a 38.4 foot long train. Basically, if we put this in a basement, it would 30 feet long, it would take up an entire wall plus. Something tells me that when we make the layout, we're going to be running 50 car trains, maybe 40. We want to get that feel of long coal drag, but we also want to make it practical. Another question: what's the radius of the diameter of these loops? Good question, hypothetical audience that's here. That is a 7.7 foot radius of curve. Are we going to have room for a 7.7 foot radius of curve? Well, we might have room, but we might not want to take up that much space with it. I think it's probably going to be a matter of compressing it. But what we will do is we will mark that that loop is 7.7, so that we have that as a base reference and we can figure out what it compresses to. Probably using 15-inch radius curves for N scale. Yeah, 38 feet exactly. Like, be super cool to do that in N scale in real life, but that is a big hunk of terrain. This is tech, and let's just for curiosity's sake, well, we can't unpause the game because we are in Surveyor, so we're gonna go back to all the way down to Quinette, and here in Quinette we can measure it, and I'm guessing it's probably also about 7 feet wide. 9 feet wide. Interesting. So it shows you how much compression we have to do. I think what's kind of fun about this exercise is that it gives you a sense of how much we have to compress when we're model railroading. Because could you do a 9-foot N scale curve? Yes. But is that kind of overkill? Yes. All right. Let's get back to our train here at Tech. Let's get, or no, that's not Tech. Let's get back to our train, which is, only challenge with it not being labeled is the fact that I'm still getting used to where everything is. Okay, that's Quinette. And we keep going this way, and there's the, okay, here we are. Or I could just go F2 and press 2, and that would be a faster way to get back to my train. There we go. Okay, so this is an interesting track arrangement. From what I've seen on YouTube, they store MOW equipment in this here, and then your other 2 tracks are the leads to the tech loop. So it's going to be interesting to figure out how to put these loops on the same level. I feel like the loops are going to be in corners, and they might be opposite corners of the room. They might be just adjacent corners. Hey, Chris, glad that you could join us. Dylan, where'd I get the electrics? Google search, if you Google search Trainz with a Z Tumbler Ridge, you'll find an Orin N3V forum thread about the project, and you'll see a Google Drive link in there. I probably should have linked it from the video description. Certainly, I'll link it when this project actually sees the light of day, as far as me completing a layout for it. Because it'd be nice. I'd like to see about what can be done as far as adding sounds to the electrics. The lights don't work. So there's still some things I'd like to clean up, and maybe work with Matt Fleming on that one. But my goal is to, hopefully, when I have the time to dedicate to this, to be able to do a really nice layout that you guys can enjoy, that shows you how to take an 80-mile branch line and turn it into something you can fit in your basement. I like this S-curve here, and there's a grade crossing. Well, there's a grade crossing right here. Oh, we should... That horn is beautiful. That horn just sounds triumphant. Gilbert Porter just found the live stream. Are you going to design a layout in the next live stream or this way? The layout design, so I feel like me working in any rail and just plotting the track is probably not the most exciting thing. If you want to see that, let me know. But I think that I'm probably going to, in between streams, actually take my notes from today and turn it into the design. But maybe at the end we'll play around a bit with that. We'll see how long this takes. You know me. I like to run these for 2 to 3 hours. I don't want to bore you guys. So we'll see how it goes. We're cruising at a nice speed there. This is where the grades begin. Here's another advantage of working in the sim. We can actually see what our grades are. So we can see that now we've got this 1.2% climb. As a general rule, of engineering with this line, and this was something that that came up in my research I've done. For loads going west, the ruling grade is 1.2%. For empties going east, the grade is 1.5. So you'll see that it never, as we're going west, it should never max out more than 1.2, which is what we're seeing here. So I'm going to make a note of that. Do I think that's going to be relevant to the design? Maybe a little. We don't need to use grades from a practical standpoint of getting tracks to go over another, because we're going to have a helix to do that. But it's good food for thought that maybe we'd put the grades in there just to kind of, so that when you're looking at this train, you can kind of realize, hey, my train is climbing. It is working up the hill. And I do think that maybe adds something to the experience. The more that we can augment this experience from a user perspective, the more that you're feeling like there's things to, because again, imagine that you're playing this. Imagine that this is a real layout, that you're running a train in somebody's house. It's N scale, so you're looking at trains that are this tall. How do you make it realistic? How do you make it exciting? So, panic torn to not miss the crossing. Well, I didn't miss the crossing, so I count that as a victory. Okay, we've got a lot of kind of just windy twisties, with a lot of trees. This bit with the road could kind of be interesting. I'm going to make note of that. I mean, the advantage with so much of this being just tree and track is that we can really tweak the real-life geography to our needs. But if there's specific scenes that we can capture, that's always what we're striving for. So I'm going to make a note of that. So we're going along road that comes along this way. There's probably a more tech-savvy way to do it than just pen and paper, but, you know, I like being able to work with my hands where possible. So much of this stuff is digital. But this, I mean, I think what's cool about this is just these trains are so massive. And you look at the videos on YouTube as well, and that's why I want to do Ed scale. I want these big hunky, even if we have to cut the train in half and make it just 50 cars. It's gonna feel big, and we want to capture that feeling. Chris asks, this route for BC Rail and Canadian National route. Yes, so this is a BC Rail route, but the operations of it were very heavily tied to Canadian National. So the way the dispatching worked is that these engines, you'd have a train of loads sent out to CN, to Canadian National, to their interchange when CN had a train coming, because they didn't want to leave the electrics and the crew stranded at the west end of the line. So there was very much a close cooperation. That's why, despite this being a BC Rail train, we've got a CN caboose, or van, I should say. This is Canadian after all. And these cabooses were specially reinforced. That's why we've got the helpers tacked onto the rear, which was how they did it in real life. Okay, so we've got another grade crossing up here. And I know I almost missed that one, but hey, unless the virtual FRA inspector is out to get me, I'll take my chances. Got some interesting flatlands here. It'll be interesting to compare this to Google Earth and see, because obviously what we're working with here is just elevation data. We don't, because the route hasn't been scenic, we don't know exactly where trees are and aren't. We can make guesses. But that's why we're going to do a little bit of further research, because if there are grassy areas, or there are kind of, the more scenic diversity we can build into this, the better. So let's fast forward, because we're basically just, there's a little bit of kind of undulation up and down, which, you know, from a model railroading standpoint, you could get some of that in there. But given that train handling is not typically a great concern with model railroading. I feel like you're kind of going for what's the overall theme, and the overall theme is we are climbing a grade, and we're starting to get into mountains. It's a really nice, spectacular looking mountains, and that to me, you notice that I have the camera mostly on the south side as we're chasing this. That's because I do think that this background lends itself really nicely to being the backdrop to what we're modeling. We could also see here as we look down how far mile-wise we've traveled from the Quinette loadout. So at this point, we're just crossing 11 miles. But you just got these nice sweeping curves. And I think that there's so much to be said about losing oneself in the scenery. Both in the sim as well as in a layout of like, I see this as a layout where the in-between sections are important because you don't constantly need siding to siding. You want people to feel like they are really traveling. And here with this big long 50-car train, well, 100 or 98 in the sim, but let's say you're doing 50 as an end scale. Ideally, you've got these scenes where you can see a lot of that train stretched out. I guess I rooted us for the side. That's okay. We can take the siding. Let me just make sure I got the switches set on the other way. Because as my luck would have it, I would set a... Oh, I would incorrectly set a switch, and that would kind of be a bummer. Okay, we're set back for the main. So this location here with the Y is... Checks his guide. This is... Tumbler. At mile marker 61.6, which is this Tumbler? This has to be Tumbler. It's the only thing I'm seeing marked on my map. I mentioned I'm still learning this one, guys. Bear with me. But we've got this interesting Y here, which I'll be interested to learn more about why there's a Y. So we've got the Y, we've got our first passing loop here, which is inside of that Y. And then there's even a second siding a little further down, which we're going to capture. And that should be... So all of the passing sidings are long enough to accommodate these 98-car trains. And my guess is the other one. Some of the I think if this is Tumbler, and I'm pretty sure this is, then this is where helpers were sometimes staged, in which case there would be... No, you'd need the helpers for the 1.2. No, that's definitely Tumbler, though, because... Yeah, that is Tumbler. Okay, so we've confirmed that this is Tumbler that we're passing through here. And I believe they'd have helper crews stationed here. But again, we don't have to worry about knowing the operations right now, which is my get out of jail free card. It's to say that this is what the track looked like, so we want to get it, and then we'll figure out its purpose in the design phase and as I research this more. Dylan, thank you for the super chat. Loving the route so far. The concept, can't wait to see it finished. I think this is going to be a fun one because I feel like, it would be really cool to see this whole 80-mile thing scenic and done. But I feel like I think that taking that experience and making it a bite-sized thing that you could enjoy in an hour or two is going to be equally fun. And if somebody wants to build this, please let me know. I so want to know if this inspires you in any way, or even if you're just inspired to do something based off of what you've seen on the show. Happy to help people out. So, here we are leaving. But I think that BC Rail had camp cars, like MLW cars that crews could be stationed in as well, if I'm remembering correctly. A big element to what dictated how trains moved was crew, where crews could be relieved, how far they had to travel to get to the motel or wherever they were staying, because this is rural British Columbia. I mean, we are in the middle of nowhere, and we're only going further into the middle of nowhere. We've got another grade crossing up here. I got it. I got it. We got the horn in time. And I won't hear anything to the contrary. So Chris's question, can you operate two trains if we're in double tracks going to operate in different directions? Yes. So the whole part of, I think one of the best designs you can do if you're doing a main line or a branch line is single track with passing siding for ops. If you do double track, your trains can meet wherever. But single track with passing siding gives you more operational interest. And that's one of the hallmarks of this route here. We've got a select number of passing sidings, and that's where your trains can meet. And that adds operational variety. Gilbert Porter, I remember seeing those same gondolas made by PWRS and Ed Scout the trade show available for sale. That's great if they're available. I have a feeling if you were to do I know that there's a company that did the electrics in brass for HO. Something tells me if you were doing them in N, you'd want to 3D print them. But again, I think it's okay, because if you figure, I'm going to pause this just so we can kind of focus. You know, if you were looking at an N-scale train, it would appear maybe about this big. I don't know what your screen size is. If you're watching this on a cell phone, then my argument is sort of moot. But if you're looking at a regular monitor, an N-scale train is going to look about this size. The thing with these engines is that there's not exactly a lot of moving parts to them. It's not like a steam engine where you want to appreciate the detail of side rods and so forth. Here, I don't think you need that. I think that just, you know, and I imagine that you could take a pre-existing 6-axle chassis and kit bash it and then 3D print different bodies. And if you're going to do this as an N-scale, well, you're going to want to have they had 7 electrics. There were only 7 of these locomotives in existence. So you might as well 3D print all 7 of them and then run them. Now, that said, this route, despite the fact that it was built for electrics, it did see diesels. In fact, today, as a Canadian national property, it sees diesels. So you can throw diesels into the mix. But let's face it, if you're doing this, you want the electrics. Virtual Railroad Academy, I appreciate your commentary on my horn skills, and I will see you next Wednesday. But it is harder than it looks to be designing a layout and talking with folks and tooting the horn at the crossing at the same time. And then Gilbert, I do love seeing the caboose at the end. I don't see the pantograph up. I am guessing they are being hauled, turned off. No, they are helping. If they're down, that's only because the sim is... Nope, those pantographs are up. Because right now, all 4 of these units are working. We've got... Each locomotive has 6,000 horsepower, so that is 2,400 horsepower. And you can see this is that 1.1... or you can't because my head's in the way. And I can't... I'll temporarily move myself out of the way. Now you can see that 1.2% grade I was telling you about. That's the climb. So this is a lot of just... This is where we can compress. And this is where the fast forward button comes in handy. Because it's just a lot of this snaky, windy, which we don't need every mile of when it comes to an N-scale layout. We're not putting this in an airport hangar. So that's part of why I thought this would be a good live stream, is because we can just kind of... I'll make a note that says this is snaky, windy territory, but we don't need to analyze every single curve. We just know that they're there, note that the mountains are on one side, and there we go. There's our updated track chart. And again, at some point, maybe in the future, I'll figure out how to tie this in. I don't know if I'd want to be drawing this in Photoshop. I like just pen and paper. If you're layout designing, what do you prefer? Do you use AnyRail or SCARM, or how do you prefer to design layouts? let me know in the comments. I'd be curious to see. For me, I'll take it to any rail, but I like starting with just being able to draw an idea out. Then I can see it. Then I'm trying to fit track to that idea. Unlike Appalachian Railroad Modeling, where he's drawing his on pen and paper or pencil and paper, and he's really good at it. Now, cut like this, that could be a nice scenic transition for when we need it. Dylan Ruppert, where do I get the electrics? Again, Google search Trainz Tumbler Ridge, and there'll be a link in the description after this stream, probably. So, cut. Because this could be a good way to split two different scenes at some point. But this stage, we're going to continue the climb at breakneck speed. That's not actually that breakneck because it's only 33 miles an hour. I love consistency. There's times when I want to operate in cab mode here in Trainz with a Z, and there's times when it's so nice to just... I've got the rail driver hooked up, but I've just got the throttle pulled out, and I don't have to worry about going between run 2, run 3, run 2, run 3. Like, I've just got it set to what I want. If you want to operate steam trains, at least have Canadian Pacific 464 Hudson excursion cars. The Royal Hudson never made it out on this line. I love Canadian steam. I've got a Rapido, 2 Rapido D10s on order. There will definitely be Canadian steam, more of that on either Great Train Layouts Live or What Makes This Layout Great. I just don't want to overwhelm you guys. It's the type of thing I'd gravitate towards, and I don't want to overwhelm you guys too much with that. And as you can see, like, this is why we can do this compression, because, I feel like even if somebody made the perfect Tumbler Ridge in the sim, mile for mile, and you were running it, like, I feel like this part would get a little boring. Like, you're just maxed out, you're just dragging the train up the hill. Sometimes it's nice to have that selective compression because, you're not actually riding this in real life. So it's a kind of a question of how long do you want to be sitting in front of the computer. This is the first minor tunnel. This is tunnel 1 here. This is a shorty. So we'll put that. And I'll put number 1 on my track chart. Perfect scenic divider. Could be great for a curve. I think that if you wanted to hide a really tight curve, which you don't really need to hide curves on a route like this because it's so mountainous anyway. But if for some reason you were looking to hide a curve or just to break up a couple of scenes, perfect short little tunnel here. How long is this tunnel in N scale? Good question. Hypothetical me. Joey the Cat, 3254 needs model representation. Are you talking about in actual... In V-scale, KL Trainz has done it. Oh, somebody already put a railer. And it's about 7 feet long. So, yep, not doing a 7-foot tunnel in real life, but wouldn't need to. Something like 2 feet would probably get the same sense of scale. RWS Baden, hi Nick. A good starting point for the GMD GF6C would be an EMD SD40-2. I believe both locomotives were the same length. I would think a 3D printed shell on a Cato drive would work. Probably. I mean, and part of why it'd be so easy is because you look at the design. I mean, it's so boxy. It'd be so easy to hide a DCC decoder, or a motor, and keep alive in there. Like, you could fit pretty much everything you need. I like this ridge running here, so I'm going to mark ridges on the track. But that's why I think that this really lends itself to N, because I think you could 3D print it and be happy. I'd even say you could probably get away with 3D printing the pantographs and just leaving them up. Like, do you ever need to have them down? I don't think so. And they only had the... Well, no, because you have one on each end. Good luck figuring out the pantograph system modelers. I'm here to design the track plans. not to get into the complicated electronics that this would entail. I'm not even suggesting live wire overhead. If you want to do that, more power to you. But I don't know that I'm that adventurous. If you are, more power to you. See, this is a nice curve. Now, it'd almost be interesting if you could kind of flip it over at some point, and now you were viewing the world from this side, just to have a little bit of differentiation, but it still looks great. I mean, these mountains, let me go into the drone view so we can, yeah. I mean, that just lends itself. Like, that is classic mountain railroading right there. Joey the Cat talking about physical models, HO. And for CN and CP Steam, you're looking at brass, buddy. You're looking at brass. That's the unfortunate reality is that ready-to-run Canadian stuff, as far as Steam is concerned, is Rapido, and that's it. Okay, so we are continuing the climb at this nice and steady 1.2%. We're going to ride along with the train for a little bit. Fast forward button, go. Ooh, drainage ditch. I like that. And that's part of the challenge is even if... So the railroad still exists. But most of the wires are gone. There's a little bit of catenary left in a couple of spots, but the wires are pretty much gone. Researching this, if you wanted to... It's so remote. You know, there's probably nobody that's ever shot a photo, unless somebody's like videoing a cab ride. Nobody's probably got a trackside photo of this location. But I'm willing to believe there's culverts there, and it makes sense that there would be, and it gives us something else to do scenically, so. Continuing up the ridge. And let's see what it looks like we're coming up to. Oh yes, this is our next short tunnel, and this is going to be Wolverine, I want to say. This is... Oh, so the first tunnel was number 4, not number 1. But I was right, there are 4 tunnels total. We're coming up to tunnel number 3, and then, yep, this is Wolverine. So, back to my paperwork. That's number 4. So... Sure enough, we've got the great giant square hole of British Columbia right here. You've seen it here, folks. This is 100%. This is probably a damn error. But we've got another shorty tunnel. This is number 3. It was so cool. So one of the neat things, you can download this route. When you search for Trainz oh, there goes Facebook. Trainz Tumbler Ridge. This route is available for download. So if you want to run it, you can. If you want to scenic it, you can. And so what I was doing is I was looking at one of the cab ride videos and watching as the train... I was in the sim looking at this curve as I was watching the cab footage of a train going around this curve. So this is a nice... This is a must. This is an absolute, we have to have this scene in here. Partially because it's a siding and there's only so many of those that we have in general. But partially, we've got this great moment where we go from a short tunnel onto a bridge, around a curve. I mean, it's like they're handing it to us on a platter here, ladies and gentlemen. They want us, the world wants us to model this route, and who are we to disagree? So, we've got tunnel 3. Which we're going to mark as number 3. We'll measure it just for curiosity's sake. We go across a little itty bitty bridge, and then we curve into Wolverine, which is yet another passage siding, and yet again we have another track here that could be stored for MOW equipment. That's funny, MSCS used to have that whole issue as well. You know, these things occasionally fluke out. Now, this is an interesting one here. This is where I would want to try to get the geography accurate. I like the way that this does this S-curve. So I feel like what we'd probably be doing when it comes to modeling, it could be done straight. I mean, this does sort of fall on a straight plane, but I do think that it could also lend itself to over-exaggerating this curve so that this could be a corner of a room. We're over-exaggerating this curve and then curving it back. But we got to get this. I mean, this is... We want this. We want an S-curve. It's a different way of viewing the train. It helps to break up the visual monotony of just seeing it from one side, while keeping the geography similar. Maybe it would be a peninsula. As I say, designing this, I'm kind of mindful of how these different elements are going to create the room that it fits in. So we've got this kind of S-curve effect for Wolverine. And it has a siding, and it has another track. And it has a railroad crossing, which yes, I did not honk for. Mea culpa. I put that in the wrong spot. So there we go. So we've already got, we've traveled a total of about 25 miles, and here we have we have 2 passing sidings, we've got 2 loops for loadouts, because you could pack this thing with traffic. I mean, I think in real life you'd have like maybe a single meet, and that's a fine way to run it, but if you wanted to really pack this thing with traffic, you can. And you can make it a very interesting day for your dispatcher based out of North Vancouver. Okay, now here comes something really cool. And actually part of a big reason why this exists. This is the tunnel number 2, also known as the Wolverine Tunnel. We're continuing that 1.2% climb. This tunnel is miles long. The longest tunnel is almost 4 miles. And this one and the next one are 2 of the longest. And we're going to see that in action. And by see that in action, I mean we're going to fast forward the train into the mountain, fly over it, and fast forward it out. Because otherwise, we're looking at this. And that's just freaky. Oh, but, well, we'll appreciate the cab when we're not underground. So, but you can see we've got this nice, big, long straight. So, what do we do with this in model rarity? Well, I think that this is a great excuse to have a helix. I think that this is a really cool opportunity to have, because as we can see, our entire train disappears into this tunnel. It's gone. So I think this really lends itself to a helix where the entire train disappears, and it gives that sense that you've entered the tunnel and it's miles long and you're waiting on the other side for your train to reemerge. Enough comments about the cup. Yes, I know I missed the horn. I know. Ah, sigh. Woe is me. But, it's nice when the real world helps you in that regard. And I think that the reason I see this as a double-decker is because then we get to really make the most of that run. And you could always analyze the design afterwards and figure out, well, if I only want to do it as a single story, or my basement's only 15 by 20, what can I take out? And maybe you take out the helix, or maybe you take out a control point or something like that. But you can tweak it. But giving yourself the opportunity of a helix gives you that much more running. And I think that's worth making the most of. So as you can see from the bottom, we are once again fast forwarding through the mountain. I guess we'll go to the map view so you can actually see the progress of the train. So you can see why this lends itself to a helix. Should it be going up or going down? I think that's for you to decide. We'll see. I'm envisioning that there's only going to be one helix, and so either way, it's going to be, so if we did the helix per prototype, where we're still doing a climb right now, that would mean having the loadouts on the bottom, and then the train climbs the helix. And maybe that's what we do. Let's We'll see. We'll see when we get to the design phase. Okay, and voila, there is our train emerging from Wolverine Tunnel. Now, the next tunnel has an interesting nickname of the Car Wash, but I'll tell you about that in a moment because we do have a little bit of scenery. So, this would be kind of interesting to do as a scenic peninsula. I'm not the reason it's worth representing this in some capacity is because if we look at the map here, this is approximately mile marker, I think 41.6. Yes, this is mile marker 41.6. How do I know that specifically? Because this was the location of a substation. Now, I'm not sure how close the substation was to the track, but I kind of feel like in the interest of model railroading and the interest of having different stuff, let's put that substation visible and put it on the inside of the curve and make that a scenic highlight. Maybe somebody has photos of the substation. I'll need to look that up. Joey the Cat, are these cup jokes a reference to Heist? Sort of. He's suggesting that I need to be drug tested because I'm not obeying railroad protocol. That's the nature of that joke. So yeah, substation around here someplace, question mark? Not exactly sure on the specific location. But we will draw that. So we've got Wolverine, which goes into tunnel, which is number 2. We merge from number 2, and then we've got this kind of U-curve with the substation. Now, and this is also this summit. So I believe it was around, forget if it was here after the next tunnel, the helpers get, but basically once the summit's crested, the helpers get cut off, they get run back towards Murray. But we've got some more windy twisties. Still climbing. I think it must be at the end of this next tunnel that the helpers would be sent back. Because, yep, we are about to go into tunnel number 1. Also known as the car wash. So, one of the unforeseen issues that was run into in real life was the fact this is the longest one, for sure. I mean, you can see how many baseboards we're having to cross with this. So, when they made the tunnels, apparently these mountains have a lot of corrosive material in them. So it would basically like drip acid and corrode the wiring overhead, which was a problem. So, yes. There was a steady, I think it was this portal here, that there would practically always be water coming out of the tunnel. And so they called it the car wash. But it was actually useful because if you had diesel helpers, it would, or diesel helpers or diesel lead units, it would kick up the caboose windows, get super dirty. So the car wash would clean them off. So as you can see here, we're still climbing a bit. Well, you can't because we're at a 0.31 incline, still going up as we're going through the tunnel. As we're pressing the fast forward button to be able to skip this bit. So we've got another long tunnel. So obviously you're not going to put a helix, have one S-curve, and put another. But I think even just representing one of the... I think this is where you represent one of the tunnels. I don't think you represent both, or maybe you shorten one of them to just be a scene divider. I don't think you get the scale of both, but I also don't think you need to. I think one disappearing into a tunnel and re-emerging is enough to get the point across. I hear the compressor, so that must mean that we are about... emerged, yay. So, I believe it's at this point that the helpers get sent back. And so we will do that. We will actually bring our... Yep, because now we are going down a 0.71% grade. And you can see up here we're getting to 1.71. That's a little bit cheap. Again, it should be about 1.5 on the way down. So, tunnel number 1. Oh, and yes, we should measure those tunnels to see how long they would be in N scale, just for the kicks and giggles of it. Maybe if you put it in a helix, it would actually get somewhere more realistic length, but even there, you're probably shortening your run. So, let us go back into the editor and find out. While we're waiting for the editor to load, I want to thank you guys for tuning in, whether you're watching live tonight or whether you're watching the replay. Thank you for supporting Great Train Layouts. Be sure to check out the new website, greattrainlayouts.com. But also, if you really enjoy this content, if you enjoy the Roundhouse podcast, please head over to patreon.com/the Roundhouse. For as little as $1 a month, you're supporting the show. You get cool perks like early access to episodes. At $5 a month, $10 a month, there's a monthly hangout that you could be participating in. Oh, here we go. There's a ruler. No, that's only to there. We'll need to draw a new ruler. So yes, there's a lot of different perks. So if you're able to support the Roundhouse, again, for even $1 a month, I appreciate it. Those of you super chatted tonight, appreciate that as well. But if not, just share these videos, let people know about them, because it's so great to have this as a group conversation, a dynamic. And I hope that you find this interesting. And please, I can take harsh criticism. If you're not digging it, that's okay. Okay, so if we were to do this tunnel in N scale, it would be 186 real feet. So, yeah. And then the second tunnel that we traversed, how long would that be? Well, let's find out. If we put a ruler over here and we go all the way over these very steep mountains, you can see why tunneling was the solution they went with. Options were considered to find passes, but it was deemed that it would just be too expensive and it would be too circuitous. 121 feet. So you could model 300 feet of tunnel if you wish. I'm suggesting that you selectively compress that. Okay, let us get back into the plane and let us get the train pulled out. We can get it stopped and then we can set the helpers back. Because, yay for prototype accuracy. And we'll wait for our train to come to a stop because, of course, we're stopping on a grade. So that's fun. I like the way it kind of curves coming out of Tunnel 1. That's sort of a neat feature. Okay. Here stopped. So now we are going to uncouple these guys. We are going to let's see, who do I want to move? I think it's that off and then sign there. So they are going to go backwards, and I'm not sure if that's a realistic. We'll send them at a slower speed. I don't really care how fast they go. We're not following them anymore, so it's not terribly important. Okay, back on the head end, and now we're heading downhill. So, Gilbert Porter says, I use Rail Modeler Pro as I use Mac, but I want to buy Windows Parallel so I can use any rail. Not familiar with Rail Modeler. I love any rail. I find it very easy to use, so I do think highly of it. Now this is interesting, because here it would make more sense to model facing this side. So the mountains have kind of switched, as far as being right next to the track, we've switched ledges. Be interesting to, geographically, there's something to be said about continuously following the same ledge. Might be nice to try to model some sense of depth with hills falling away. But again, I'm envisioning this as like a foot deep. So, not sure about that. That's going to be an interesting one to figure out. We'll take a moment here that can enjoy a view from the cab. As you can see, the cab wasn't fully completed, but you've got the Triclops windows. Gives you a nice sense of what it would be like rolling in one of these things. Hopefully someday it could be finished off. Okay. And back outside. Turn our sound back up. So from here, it's a lot of kind of ridge running, and we're going to basically fast forward that. But this is there's a photo in this that I want to see if we could find the location. We may have passed it already. I feel like this is a really nice scene right here. Mile marker 59-1. West of Tumbler Camp. Oh, we already passed that then. What I was looking for was... Oh, I stopped. Yeah, let's get fast forwarded. This scene here, I really like... let's see, there we go. I really like this. So I'd really like to do something that emulates that. And this kind of does. I mean, that location we could go back to and figure out later. But this is I like this element of looking down the track. It'd be kind of interesting to do a peninsula so you get that perspective of looking down your train, not always looking at the side of it. I'm going to mark that as peninsula, question mark. I'm kind of envisioning the overall plan to be a long room with a peninsula, because there's a lot of just winding, twisting stuff. So it might be nice to use peninsulas as a way of getting slightly different perspective, so you can view the train from the front. You're not always viewing it from one side or another. Oh, and here we have our first meet, except we're set to go into the siding, which is where our train is. So yes, I thought it might be fun for us to have a little bit of a... getting a sense of... Oh, whoops. That's why I can't stop in time. So, are we going to stop in time? Maybe? Oh, I'm not going to be able to push this train uphill because it's a 1.5%. Yeah. We're gonna reposition our train using the virtual 5-fingered crane. Pay no attention to the man in the corner who's pulling his train out of a hill with a thing. Let me get logged out of Facebook so I'm not hearing those notifications. Well, I usually make a point to avoid that, but I forgot this time. Okay. Sorry about that. Now, where were we? We were pretending that I didn't have the switch line for the wrong direction. And now it's lined for the correct direction. This is... Checks his notes. This is Whitford. So this is another passing siding. That again, you could sense, you can see the theme here. Like, you've got these tracks that can store MOW equipment and trains, and are just good for that. And then you've got this full ledge that's set to store your 98 car loaded and empty trains. So let's make the most of this meet. And let's actually, let's see. Do we want to see it from the cab, or... Yeah, we'll watch it trackside. Why not? And then we'll switch the cab. And we'll fast forward here. And there we go. So this is going to be the heart of operations. It's single track passing siding and making the most of these meets. Obviously, per prototype, you'd have maybe one meet, but you could always increase the traffic flow and make it a little bit more compact, as it were. While we're having this meet, what do you guys those of you who are joining live, what do you think so far? Do you like what you're seeing? Do you like this approach to analyzing and looking at model railroad design? Always game for your feedback. So let's switch to the cab. Okay. So Whitford, which basically, once we draw that out, is the same idea as what we've been going. Full loop, partial loop, and it kind of curves in. So I'm going to emphasize that curve into the scene. And then it curves out. So it kind of does an S-curve arrangement. Now, this would be a tricky one because it is right up against the ledge. So I almost feel like here we have to change geography because you've got this. If you take out the mountain, I feel like you take out the character of the location here. So that's going to be an interesting challenge because I do feel like here we need to switch sides. And maybe we accomplish that switching sides from the tunnel. If we say that the tunnel 4... Well, if we're combining them, that could be interesting to figure out. But Tunnel 4 is our chance that, so when you're going into Tunnel 4 from the east, you're looking at your train going right to left. And then when you come out of the tunnel, it's left to right. That could make sense. Something like that. But basically, we've got this kind of W arrangement with it. And then we are set to pass our train. Lovely. What are the pink boxes? RW Spade? I have no idea. There's something to do with some sort of... probably something to do with Trainz scripting or signaling, but I do not know what that is. Yeah, I feel like this part... We're doing so much ledge running going the other way. It might be worth switching directions. So we kind of do this W and then we close up. And then we're running along this side. Fast forward time. And we'll speed up a little bit. And as you can see, this is all 1.5% down. Oh, now this is a cool view. I like this. I like the way that it hugs the mountain here. That is interesting to me. Because I like the idea of that could be an interesting... I could see it coming and doing a peninsula wrap for this part here. So I'm going to mark that as a peninsula wrap location because I like the way that it appears through there. And yeah, we might be having trees, but, you know, it's model railroading. We could thin out the herd as we need. Thin out the herd. Herd of trees. Hashtag herd of trees. The name of my new indie rock band. Okay. So. And then we are going along here. So this is part of why the fast forward button's so great, because you can see this is more of the same. Like, we don't really have any sort of big scenic highlights, no rivers, no bridges. This is all just woods and mountain. which looks great, but like you get 1 or 2 scenes like that and you're good. So we'll keep fast forwarding. I love how you can watch the train sort of wiggling around with the track joints at a faster speed. That cut's kind of interesting. I don't think we're gonna really change much at this stage, but worth noting there is a cut. Another wrapping around a mountain. So now we're about 3/4 of the way to the CN interchange. Hello, Derpy Possum. Good to see you back. As we are using Trainz to plot out and kind of gain scenic inspiration for an N-scale model of the Tumbler Ridge branch line of the BC Rail. Some kind of bridge here. Model, we'll mark that. I would put that as a medium. And I'm guessing most of these bridges are not through trusses, but with luck, maybe somebody recorded that exact bridge and then I can confirm that. Continuing down the grade. Things getting a little bit, starting to get more flat. So I feel like we've got mountain up till about that cut. Maybe that cut in that peninsula where it transitions from mountain to more flat forest. I'm going to put flat on this side of the track. But see here, if we cut the hills out here, you're looking at it from this way, so you're kind of noticing more of the flat forested area anyway. So I think it's okay if we don't represent these hills, or this is where people stand. Okay, continuing to fast forward along here. We've got another bridge over here. So we'll mark that as a medium. I had to reach for my pen that I dropped. And that's good. And probably some of those bridges are going to be omitted. We're coming up to one that I do think is worth modeling, but we are first going through tabletop. And I'm pretty sure I got that right. Oh, this is one area that has some overhead catenary, so we should make the most of that scenically. While I'm making this note down, we are going to enjoy seeing the train actually use some catenary. Had to get a screenshot of that. This is what we're going for scenically. This is the experience we want to sell. So let me check. Okay, so the siding comes out on the, well, let me think. That'd be the north end. And now this is going to be a really great location to represent. I see this is definitely going to be a straight section because it's flat. So this is definitely in between it, like a wall scene right here. A wall or maybe part of a peninsula of some kind. And then our passing siding, as I call it. And that is tabletop. And I believe that is the last of the interchanges. I mean, interchanges would be interesting with this. We're coming up to the big interchange in a moment, but that is the last of the passing. Yes, not tabletop. It's just called table. Milepost 16.1, and yes, that is the last passing sighting before we get to the end of the line. So a bit more fast forwarding in order. But we have a bit more catenary we could actually look at and say, hey, that looks cool. Oh, it's getting darker. I just realized, probably because the day is getting longer and the environmental setting's a bit weird. I'm going to turn this up lighting-wise. And we go into environment settings. Yeah, no wonder it got so dark. We need to really brighten that up a bit, but we'll also just we'll turn back time. Oh, if only we could turn back time. Actually, now this looks even better because we have proper lighting. But this is what makes this, as opposed to what makes this layout great, what makes this rail route great. I just think it looks impressive. Like, yeah, it may not have the full operational diversity that I typically like, but it's just so unique and so cool. And if you're modeling it, it'd be so easy to say, hey, I'm going to throw in another industry and have some timber product or some local industry. So you'd actually have a local train as opposed to just these mammoth coal drags. I think that would be really fun to add that element of variety. But even just if we could get the look and the feel for the big design right, then we know we've nailed it. Uh, Virtual Railroad Academy asks, no puns tonight? I know, especially with an electric route, it's positively shocking. Okay. So yeah, a lot of this is just flat forested land. Um, I mean, this is kind of an interesting scene here, but I feel like it's the curvature is so loose you wouldn't really notice it in terms of having to make it work on a model. And also now we don't have the mountains to hide the peninsulas. So I'm not. Yeah, we'll see how that. I keep talking like I'm supposed to have the answers tonight. Some of the things it's easier to know what I'm going to do, and others it's like I'm going to need to play with this a bit more. But at least what's nice is being able to see the train through the landscape and kind of visualize how it all fits, because this is something you don't get from Google Maps. You can't figure out how the train's actually going to look in the scene, and that's such a key part. The train is the star. So it's one thing to look at the tracks from the top down and say, well, they're straight, but it's another to actually be at you know bird's eye level at an angle and say, okay, but how does the train actually look sweeping through here? What's the visual impression that I want to provide? So, fast forwarding some more to get to the interchange. So, looks like we're not too far from the Yeah, we're not too far from the end of the line. So, I'm going to ask you guys what you would like to see. I'm going to give you a choice. Um, I hadn't planned on building anything tonight. Um, but we can. Do I have anything that I could show that hasn't been seen yet? Not really. I mean, would you guys want to see me start to design in maybe we'll sketch out a plan in like Photoshop or something once this is done. that might be the thing to do, and we could kind of play with the different scenes there, and kind of comparing it to the track chart and be like, okay, how do we actually fit this from a loose perspective, and then later I'll take it in an AnyRail and work. Thomas Osborne, new here. Are you going to build this layout in real life or program like SCARM or something else? Actually, Tom, I'm going to be building this as a layout in this software, Trainz with a Z, because that way then you, yes, you, can play with it. If you own Trainz 2019 or later, you're going to be able to download you're going to be able to play with it. Trainz really lends itself well to playtesting. That's why I'm a big proponent of it, is that I think that there's something to be said for actually being able to run your layout for hours and hours and make sure that it's going to hold your interest. Here we are crossing. This is an access road, so there's this access road that goes along the whole line that kind of makes cameo appearances. No, I did not honk. I am not... no cups. Sorry. So, a little bit of windy flat. And then we've got the grade crossing there. Don't worry, we'll have plenty of horn opportunity. Okay. The magical fast forward button. Now here is character. This is a nice ridge scene. And I've seen, from video that I've seen of the line, have seen a lot of this kind of ridge stuff. So it would be nice to, I'm going to make a note of ridges. Ridge. And actually the way the access road kind of appears near the ridge is sort of interesting. I feel like I've seen a shot taken from this access road looking up. Like, that's a nice perspective. So it'd be cool to get that as far as the sim is concerned. Or as far as the layout design. So it encourages you not just to have these sort of god helicopter views looking down on the train, but also encourages you to look up. Especially in N scale, to make the train seem larger is never a bad thing. Okay. Looks like another drainage ditch. There. So I'm gonna mark that. Now, some of this river stuff is visible from the train, having looked at the videos. But I think it's never super parallel, so I think the river's really going to become a thing just with the bridges. John Overman just joined the stream. How big is this layout? It looks massive. Well, this is actually a rendering of the entire almost 80-mile Tumbler Ridge line. So this isn't the layout. If this were a layout, I would probably need an airport hangar or two to actually fit it all. But what we're doing tonight is we are analyzing the real track arrangement and the topography and figuring out what are the big scenic moments, what are the sidings and things that we want to include in the track plan. Because I think that, yes, there's plenty of research to be done by photos and studying those, but I think so much of this route, it's documented, there's photos, there's video, but it's not the type of thing that if you did something incorrect, somebody's going to point and say you did that wrong. So we're looking to kind of figure out how to capture the feeling of this. Now this is interesting right here. I like this. I like how there's the track on this really tall ridge, and then the road, and then the river. And we could kind of compress the distance between those. So I'm going to put ridge, road, and then river along a curve. Because that'll be a nice scene. and something different than just the bridges. We got it. Derpy Possum. So, if someone were to draw up a decently larger layout plan that's easy to read, what would be the likelihood of it being built on stream if submitted asking for a friend? Well, you can tell your friend that I do commissions. I am happy to help you simulate your layout. So, if you go to greattrainlayouts.com/commissions, you can contact me and discuss what your friend has in mind for their layout. And I'm happy to work with you on designing it. If you say, hey, this is the prototype I want to do, or this is a basis of what I want to do, I could do the 2D track design. I could do the 3D implementation of that track design, however much or however little you need me to do. I'm more than happy to help you out. GreatTrainLayouts.com. I mean, you can see the caboose, that itty bitty red dot all the way in the back. Like, I just love how big this feels. Like, this feels like it's such a different slice of coal railroading. Because I think of Appalachian coal railroading and Norfolk Southern and the like, and it's cool, but it's a different flavor from this. Now this is a cool. This is the let me see if I can find the name of it. I want to say it's the Parker Bridge. It has a specific name, and that specific name he named. So this is the actual bridge, which is to say it is the Parsnip River Bridge. Okay, so this is a must. I mean, this is something scenically. It's a different type of bridge design. Let's measure how large this is, because I'm going to try to do it to scale on the layout, because I want to use this actual, no, not cameras, because I want to use this actual bridge model. 3.6 feet. That's a reasonable length. So I'm going to draw Parsnip River Bridge. Here, 3.6 feet. I should have also measured the Murray Bridge from earlier. I'll get that later. Back to the gameplay. And see, this is what's so great about doing the sim element of this is you saw, like, I didn't have to go to Google Earth and measure it and then convert the rail units into N scale. Like, I could just look at it and okay, 3.6 feet. Nice and simple. Obviously, you can't do this with every possible project, because not every possible route has been made for a train simulator, but where they have been, they're worth studying, because you can learn so much. Here I am. I'm completely on the opposite side of the continent from British Columbia, but I'm going to try to, I'm going to be trying to make a BC Rail route that I hope captures the feel of this railroad, especially because it's such recent history. I mean, there's plenty of guys alive who worked this thing, and I'd be interested to kind of get their perspective and hear their stories and whatnot. So it would be really, so it's something different, and it's nice that we get to use this tool in this particular way. RWS is track planning. Is there a track planning software package that will allow you to import the track plan into Trainz? Yes, it's called Base Maps. And Base Maps, it'll take a 2D image and it imports it. Now, here's the key. It'll take your 2D image and it'll import it into the sim. It won't automatically add track. It won't automatically add scenery, but it will allow you to basically trace your track and create a route that way. There's no shortcut to that nitty-gritty of actually having to do the route building work, but it does ensure that if you're planning in, say, any rail, and you want to make sure that your 24 inch radius curve is exactly 24 inches in the sim, that you get that 1-for-1. John Overman, like that bridge, I wonder if it could be part of the scenery. Absolutely, yeah. The Parsnip River Bridge that we just crossed, that is a must because it's just something different. So that is definitely getting modeled. And here we are at the end of our, or just about at the end of our run. This is Wakely. So Wakely, and I guess we should slow down because we are actually going to stop soon. And we've got another bridge. This is going to be a whole drawing, but I'm going to talk while we watch the train coming in. So Wakely is where the Tumbler Ridge line joins the BC Rail main line, is at this Y here. What's interesting is that for at least part of their era of operations, so we're bringing this loaded coal train in, and we're going to take it to Cheetah. To Cheetah is where the train gets interchanged with CN. The empties would be pushed back along this line and around the Y, and then continue on their way. So this Y is very much here for a reason. It varied. Sometimes they would just swap the power to Cheetah and swap the caboose ends. But other times they would run around the train in its entirety. Or they would shove the train back here and Y the whole train. And why not? Ah, see, I'm making up for the lack of puns from earlier. Well, I did the Y one earlier. Sorry for those of you who were there for the first one. Okay, so let's draw this out. So we've got a little bit of ridge running, and then we get into the Y. And the Y curves in. There's the bridge right before the Y. And here's another reason why this route is just begging to be modeled. And then we have another bridge right after. Like, this is such a model railroad scene right here. Having the two bridges, the access roads. Like, this is just screaming, please model me. In the layout track plan, I mean. I'm not sure what you mean by in the layout track plan. Like, yes, I plan on including the bridge, but I'm not sure what you mean by in the... Oh, like, can you put the bridge into the track plan that gets imported in the program? Yes. Yeah, I think so. If I understand what you mean correctly. So here we are. We're about to come into Cheetah, which is right over here. And I guess we'll take the main because we've lined it for the main, and why not? I like this scene here, actually. It looks like this is a ridge as opposed to a bridge, but that makes it different. So, ridge. And water. On both sides. That might just be an error. That might actually be a bridge, but still worth noting. And then the way that the access road curves to the side too, I like that. We'll slow down a bit more. So again, at this point, we are actually on the BC Rail main line, which links Kennedy and Prince George. So the coal would be, so the coal will continue going this way. It will continue going west to Prince George. So at this point, the electrics are cut off. So these are ready tracks here for the electrics, as you can see by the hookups. And we've got two tracks, so you have the ability to bring in a loaded train and be waiting on an empty, and then even when that empty train comes in, you could still run stuff through on the main. So what you realize, and this to me is the best part as far as like how it comes together as a layout. So on on the east end, you've got the two essentially reverse loops that are the loadouts. Well, on the west end, guess what you've got? You've got a Y. And so what that means is that here's the tumbler line, the Tumbler Ridge line. So now you've got your CN connection here with Cheetah, and then you can loop your staging around behind whatever, and then it's reappearing at Wakely North at the Y. So you've got a built-in excuse for a reverse loop, because now your staging allows you to run mainline BC Rail freight along just the regular main line. You could have your staging area staged with your loaded or your empty coal trains that are bringing hoppers in and feeding them to the BC Rail at Cheetah. I mean, isn't that just so perfect? Like, that's what I love about this. That's why I decided to take this on as a modeling project, because I looked at it and I'm like, there's so many elements that just perfectly fit into being a model railroader. Yes, there's going to be compromises, but so much of this, I feel like it was just meant to be. It was meant to be. It was meant to BC. So, let us have a look at how things are going here. So we are coming into the CN interchange. I do think that the greatest challenge with designing this in the sim is going to be that element of train length. That is going to be a toughie, because there's no way we could do 98 car trains. I wish we could do 98 car trains. Now this is nice. This is really pretty. And this could work either way, as either, I think it's probably going to be facing into the scene here with the water along there. I like how this looks. Like, if we could make this a peninsula so that there's an element of looking out over the water. The problem with this side is then you can't take your staging can't go behind this lake. It'd be way too, I mean, it could if your lake you put the lake next to the backdrop and then it loops behind the lake, but that's not ideal. I mean, this is nice to look out across, but I think really if we can make it a peninsula so we have that element of looking across the lake, then that'll work. Alrighty. And there we go. So we have dropped off our loaded train at Cheetah after, well, I don't know how long it actually was because I reset the clock, but probably took us somewhere in the area of, I mean, yes, it took us 2 real hours, but sim time, it was probably more like 3 because we did do a fair amount of fast forwarding. So we're coming to a stop, and then want to model the yard. So we've got the 2 ready tracks. We've got the big passing loop, which peninsulas nicely, and we've got the little passing loop. Oh, and here's the other reason why we can't put the staging over the water is because that staging needs to link up with the Y, so it has to be visible from this way. Phoenix 458, Google search, Tumbler Ridge, Trainz. It's in the Orin forums where you find the electrics. The hoppers are from Jointed Rail, the caboose is from Jointed Rail. And actually this route that we've been driving in tonight is also part of the same Google Drive link that the electrics come in. So there we have it. That is a trek across the Tumbler Ridge. So it gives you a sense of what the real life thing was like. And again, you could go to YouTube and you can find other videos out there of what the prototype was like. And see just how cool this slice of railroading was. So yeah, there's not a lot of operational variety, but let's see what we can do with it to get it right. Because I feel like if we could create the base of it, we create the real Tumbler Ridge, as just a coal conveyor, then you can take it on your own and sort of say, well, what if we add in other mines? What if we add in other sources of traffic. Maybe there's some sort of manufacturing along the way. That's the fun of it. John Overman, what I meant was when you designed the track plan based off of tonight's section, was the Parsnip River Bridge going to be one of the highlights if you had to compress the layout down? Yes. Yeah, Parsnip River Bridge would definitely be in the design. To me, so let's go over the kind of going over the track plan as a whole. And actually, let's switch to map mode because I feel like that's going to be the easiest way to look at what we're talking about. So, starting again from the east, all the way over here, we've got the Quinette set. We've got Quinette, and we've got the Quinette loader. That's a must, beyond any shadow of a doubt. From that, we've got not really anything too scenically specific, just enough to separate that loadout from the tech loadout, which is coming up in a moment. So you've got these two loadouts, which is nice because then you're not, no two runs are exactly identical. At least then you have, you can go to one loadout or another, and you can have different trains loading at different times. I like this scene, but there are other places we'll have river and track together. Oh, this is the one. There's two things we need between the Quinette loadout and the tech loadout. One is this bridge, and the other is the locomotive shops. So helpers can be staged, and you could also occasionally change out your motive power. Then from there, we've got the tech loadout. And then it's tracks that connect to the main over here. Then it's a lot of 1.5% climb. And this can be cut down. So this is the first of, if we count them, we have one. This is Tumbler. So we've got, as far as passing tracks are concerned, there's Tumbler, Wolverine, Whitford, and Table. So 4 places you can pass trains. Can we fit them all into the track plan? Maybe. I'm inclined to say one of them might need to be cut. But 3 places to have train meets is still a good amount. This is one I would probably keep just because it has the Y, so it's a little bit different. Then again, you could say, well, maybe the Y complicates matters, because how do you fit that much room for a Y if it's running along the shelf? I don't have an answer to that, but I think that for sometimes the helpers were staged here, so that might not be unimportant. We might need to have this one for that reason. Going further up the line, just a lot of kind of going along the ridge, there's 2 short tunnels, which we can see. This is tunnel number 4 here. And then over this ridge, we come up to tunnel number 3. So this is tunnel 3. This is Wolverine siding. So I think that, and it might be Wolverine siding that gets cut. Oh, there's our helper units making their way back very slowly. So it might be Wolverine that gets cut. Potentially. I think 3, I wouldn't want to go lower than 3, because I want to make sure that there's enough variety in terms of where trains can meet. Then we've got one of the 2 big tunnels, the substation kind of S-curve peninsula thing, which, given how long the tunnels are, I think there's just going to be a long tunnel, and that's going to be a helix to change between different elevations. Potato Head writes, the Y might be on a corner of the table, like on a corner of the wall where the track is at an angle. Yeah, that's a good call. I'm going to write that down because I like that as an idea. So then we emerge from the car wash, and now we're going down this 1.5% grade. And it's basically consistently like this, but we do have Whitford over here. And then a lot more of just climbing down the 1.5. Then we get into the flat area. There's a bridge here. And you can see this heavily forestation because obviously this is a satellite image originally, so you could see how much forest we're going to have. Got a bridge over here, and then we keep going for a while until we hit table over here. A table, on the surface of it, we could eliminate it because it's another passing siding that doesn't really have operational significance. But being that it's a passing siding that's not in the mountains, I think table is a keeper. I think table, we have to have table, and I think that we do have to have uh, tumbler. I think tumbler and tumbler and table are the two that we absolutely need to have, and then it becomes a question of do we keep Whitford or do we keep um, Wolverine? From table, a lot of going along the flats, a little bit of river running. There, I like this scene here in particular. That's definitely something I want to include. And then we have the this is a must right here, the Parsnip River Bridge, because it's the only truss bridge. It's one of those kind of showstopper scenes. It's definitely going into the mix. We've got the Y. And then we have Cheetah, where where BC Rail interchanges with the main. And typically it looked like CN Power would pick up the cars, and so you'd have CN Power running on the BC lines. Was this a CN line that it interchanged with? Now I gotta look at the larger map. Because I need to see. Okay. Chetwynd. CN. Actually, I think this is a CN line. Yep. Yeah, this is Canadian National Territory. There you have it. Canadian National Interchange. CN Power takes over, takes the coal to Prince George, where it gets shipped off to Japan. So, do you guys have any questions? Is there anything else you want to see of this route? I know we're ending it had earlier than we typically do, but I don't have anything else that's coming to mind as far as an immediate showing of things. I suppose I could scan. We could start sketching out something in Photoshop, um, and just start sketching the base features and going off of that, um, or even maybe firing up any rail. Um, let's fire up any rail, and let's see what we could do for starters with it. So I'm gonna switch screens, but stay tuned here on Great Train Layouts Live. Thank you for watching. I hope that you're enjoying this, and I appreciate you tuning in. I'll see you in just a moment. All right, I just have to bring up Photoshop. Because I'm going to do Photoshop first. I want to use that as the illustrated first. Before we get to designing. Because I still feel like we're in the sketch phase. So we're going to experiment in the sketch phase and see what that encourages design-wise. And then we'll map it out in any rail, but that'll probably happen off stream. If only I understood how this fully worked. And maybe that. Let me bring up paint. Sorry, guys. Because if nothing else, we could do this in paint. Which is not as professional, but hey, we're just kind of sketching out ideas and looking at it and being like, does this feel like it can work as a thing? So we'll do about 1200 by 800. Close enough. And then if we... There we go. Okay. Now we've got paint. Now we can look at this properly. Okay, so I feel like we could start from either end and probably do okay, but I think fitting the two loops is going to be the first order of business as far as sketching those out. So in N scale, we want to make those, I mean, in real life, we discovered that those diameters were 9 feet and roughly 7 feet for each of the loadouts. We don't want to take up that much space. How much space do we want to take up? Well, I kind of feel like we want to go loose. We don't want them to be super tight. So probably maybe about like 5 feet. So 2.5 feet radius. Even that would be kind of bigger than they need to. I sort of want to make them about 4 feet. So we have one loop. And I'm going to make it here at the bottom initially. And that's going to be the Quinette loadout. Hello, White Star. We are taking the Tumbler Ridge sub, which we just finished crossing in Trainz, and figuring out how to make it work in... make it work as a layout design. I want to do that as one corner, and I feel like I want to do the tech loadout as another corner. Because these big loops just lend themselves to corners, and because we don't need a couple or uncouple cars, as long as the track works smooth, we can fit them into corners. So if the tech loadout's here, and Quinette's here, and then the big things that we want to include are the river bridge scene, which would probably be right about here. And then the engine shop scene, and that's going to be right about there. Then we're looping around. And I'm treating this... So I'm treating this like a 30 by 20 foot room. That seems like a reasonable space as far as a basement is concerned. So we're going to... I'm sketching this out, recognizing that this may change when it goes to any rail. But when it gets to any rail, I don't know. I don't even know if this part's as exciting to watch streaming-wise, so I don't want to bore you with any rail, even if this is... But let's see what we can fit in here. So, we've got the two corners. There's 2 railroad crossings here. We might just put 1 railroad crossing right about here. There's the ledge scenery, and that ledge would be about here in this area. So ledge, I'm going to put an L. for ledge. Recognizing that this is 20 feet long, I like the idea of having it staged as such. Now we've got 30 feet along this wall. This is mainly, in looking at my notes, got a few bridges, but I don't think those bridges are really important to include. There's the access road, and that does cross over at one point. We've got the access road that crosses over. And then we've got Tumbler. And we definitely want Tumbler. And Tumbler is... This is where we talked about the fact that it's a Y and how do we fit the Y in there. And maybe we would do a peninsula coming into the space this way and have the Y over here. Because then that allows us to have a curve that's kind of hidden. And then in terms of Tumbler itself, there's not really much remarkable about it. It kind of curves around. And then it's a lot of just mountain climbing. There's a cut at one point. So maybe the cut could be here. I'm going to put C for cut. And then we have a couple of tunnels. Tunnel might be a good idea to put here. So one of the tunnels in this corner, because then it hides a curve, which would be nice. And I feel like I don't want to underestimate how long that passing track is going to take, because we know that from measuring the train, it's about 38 feet end scale for a fully loaded 98-car train. So if we cut that in half, if we say 50 cars, then we still need 20 feet of room, which is going to impact how big the loops are as well. Because if the loop is a 5-foot diameter, it's roughly a 15-foot circumference if it was a perfect circle. So I like how that sounds. But then I want to make sure that there's enough room. I think that putting a passing siding in here is a good place for that first passing siding. There's not a lot of running room between here and Tech, but maybe if a train's waiting to get to one of the two loadouts, it has to wait here anyway before the loading can be done. Yeah, I like this as the location for one of the loadouts. So we've got a short tunnel here. Then it's ridge scenery and drainage. Scenes through here. And now this is going to be... Okay, I think I've started to see what I want to do through this. Then there's another short tunnel here. Or do we put Wolverine here? There's a short tunnel and then Wolverine. Oh, I think we put the short tunnel in the middle. And then, because there's the short tunnel, the bridge, and then that track curves right before Wolverine. Why not put that in a corner? That makes perfect sense. So we've got the bridge here. And then from here, we are taking... That track goes into Wolverine, which is going to be... I'm going to put a big W for that. And then from here, this would actually be a good place to take it into a helix. Because, yeah, I emphasize this hasn't been drawn to scale. And obviously, because we're working in a virtual space, I can make the room whatever size I need it to be. So it may end up being a long... Maybe I'll make it 15 by 25 or something like that. Or 15 by 30 if it ends up being too big a space. Although too big a space is always a good problem to have in model railroading. But here, you know, I like this because then I've probably overestimated how much I can fit in. So when I take it to every rail, it'll compress down and then I can make the hard choices of what I need to make. But I like what we've fit. We've got 2 passing tracks and the 2 loaders on the single level. So that's going to be drawing 1. And can I bring up another one without... let's say... Can I bring up another one without saving that? Let's just see if I can increase... I'm just going to double the canvas. because the reality is when I design this as a track plane, I'm going to design 2 layers, but they also have to be imported differently because in Trainz I can't stack the layers on top of one another. I can't build a route with 2 layers stacked, so they have to be kind of separated anyway. So we've got our second half here. The helix emerges. And is the helix going up? I think so. I'm inclined to say that these loaders are the bottom level, and then the staging's going to be, and the interchange is going to be the top level. Because that way, the tunnels are a climb, and then also, it's a climb for the train. The key is going to be, can 4 engines power 50 N-scale cars? And I would imagine they should be able to. And then coming out this way, we could actually, now we're going, remember how we talked about going from left to right and switching to right to left because of how that works scenically? That's going to work here. Because now we're going right to left after the big tunnels. We have another, this is the location of one of the passing sidings. I want to say Whitfield? Whitford. This is going to be Whitford. So we've got Whitford here. And Whitford then gets to curve around with the edge of the room. And then from Whitford, there's not a lot too scenery specific, although I have a note in here about making it some sort of peninsula where we get to see the train curving around a mountain. Now, on the upper level, oh wait, I realize that you're not seeing any of this because I need to, so my apologies. Okay, so on the left we have the lower level, and then we're going to say the right is the upper level. So we've got the Whitfield Passage siding. I want a peninsula in which the train curves around from the mountain. However, I haven't done one on the bottom, and when you're doing a double-decker layout, you have to be mindful of how your top elements align with your bottom elements. So if you have a peninsula on the top, you have to have a peninsula on the bottom, and vice versa, because otherwise you can't see the scenery close because you don't have the room to walk in. So I made a note about doing a peninsula scene, which I'd like to do, but I'm not seeing how it's going to be feasible with that. I think it's more likely there. I had note of an S-curve. There is an S-curve coming out of that tunnel, so I might do an S-curve kind of arrangement coming out of the mountain here. That might be how I fit the S-curve in there. And maybe I'll spiral the track in a different direction as well. So, from here, we bring the track together, and then it's basically just going down that 1.5% grade all the way until we get to table. I have notes about, there's a couple of bridges. I'm inclined to say it unites, it keeps coming down, it kind of does wavy stuff. I sort of want to put table along this wall here, although I realize that I'm starting to run out of room because I'm going to need to fit staging. And staging is actually, this is going to be interesting because I might have to flip it. This is why I don't want to lose you guys through my brainstorming, but hopefully you find this at least somewhat interesting as far as my thought process. So, let's keep going with this thread, and then we'll see if we run into any issues. So, table could be somewhere in here, but so we're going through table, maybe around this corner, and then it does windy, twisty through. Here's the problem that I'm realizing. We're facing the wrong way for the interchange. And here's how I know we're facing the wrong way for the interchange. Because I want the interchange to be along this wall. I want the interchange to be so that Cheetah is over here, the Y is in a corner, and then the Parsnip River Bridge is over here. And I'm backwards from what I want to be. And it's not going to work the other way around. I can't, because the Y would then be curving off. The main line curves off into the backdrop. Can't do it. So now I'm thinking to myself, let's see how far I can undo this. Maybe what we end up doing, I don't like the idea of having to cross the... I like how the top is oriented, but what I don't like is that it's okay for this part of the bottom. Unless we switch it to the bottom. Now, the bottom could have a peninsula that the top does not have. Potentially. Especially if we put a tunnel. So the tunnel is over here on this side of the wall. So if we have the track come around and then it peninsulas out this way. But the problem is it still leaves me on the wrong side. What if we just take the track... So if this is the upper loop anyway, maybe this is a duck under. And then we're going along here. I mean, it's not the way I want to be oriented for the... It's not the way I want to be oriented, but I don't see a way of being able to switch the sides as I need to. That's the challenge of the thing. This is where it gets puzzling, because there's so much is based on how scenes are oriented, and that is really key to the whole kind of balance of the scene. I hope this is making sense. If I'm confusing you, please comment and let me know, and I will gladly clarify what I'm thinking, because this is a lot of me thinking out loud. But basically, what I'm thinking is that the orientation for... if we could fit both Whitford and Table as interchange, or as passing sidings. Whitford... The way that you view Whitford east to west is reversed from how the Cheetah and the Y at Wakely are viewed. So that is interesting. That is very interesting. Let me draw. So I'm going to draw Cheetah because this might help me think through it. So Cheetah is here, and then somehow it also has to... There's got to be a peninsula here, because there has to be enough room for the tracks of the CN main line to disappear into an invisible staging. So we have a hidden staging that goes behind the scene here. The Cheetah's in our front. The Cheetah's along here, and then somehow we also have to bring this loop around. I've seen this. Okay. We have to have our Y scene. So curves there, and then the Y scene goes into a peninsula. And then this is where the track rejoins with the staging. So all of this in red. Yeah, that's too dark. This orange section here is the staging section. So that's the staging section right here. Which means we've got Cheetah going out on a peninsula. And then... Am I oriented the right way for the... So then we curve around here. And then that would put the Parsnip River Bridge... Not exactly where... Well, no, it could work. Parsnip River Bridge could then go in this area here. And then we have this flat section, curves around... And then Table is over here. So Table is that way, but we've drawn it, so we need a helix over here. I'm kind of not ready for the helix. Like, I still haven't fit Whitford and that 1.5% kind of getting into the mountains. And we've agreed that Table is a fixed point. So I think, let's say that this is locked in. So what we're looking at here on the right side of the screen, that is fixed. We are not messing with that. We are not changing that. Because that is oriented 100% perfectly. I mean, maybe I'm not a fan with how the Y ends up looking, but I feel like we've got to have a peninsula to be able to give room for this staging track to appear and reconnect. And again, you don't have to worry about coupling and uncoupling cars in these sections. Like, it's okay if this goes into some hidden staging section, because the trains are really going to be pre-built. Like, you can build your trains on the layout, then they disappear, then you stage them. So you don't need to access the trains in the staging area. RWS beta, come out of the helix in the opposite direction to fit what you have. That might work. Let's continue drawing it from this side of things. I think that's what's going to work best. So, man, as Photoshop uses paint to draw his plans. Yeah, but don't worry. The actual plan will get drawn up in any rail so that we know that this is actually physically possible. And I think it is. I'm not worried at this point about train length per se. I'm just worried about trying to get the scenes to line up right. Then we'll figure out what we actually have room for in terms of turn radii and so forth. Okay, so this is table on here, and then it's going along this edge. So we need to... the helix needs to be here. So basically it's whatever we can fit between this point and this point. And I feel like it's gonna... I think Whitford's gonna hit the chopping block. I think it's gonna be table, and table's gonna be around this curve, so that there's a sense of running between table and to Cheetah. And there's also a sense of running between table and the helix. Because we've got 3 of the passage sidings in. I just don't know. Now, if we had room for another peninsula, maybe, and this is going to be where I'm going to have to measure things out, then we might have room for Whitford. And now, Whitford's not oriented the way I want it to be, because I want to be on essentially what's the bottom side of what we're viewing, but I just don't see a transition point. I mean, I unless you, like, completely... Yeah. I think Whitford's going to have to be viewed from the opposite way that I'd like it to be viewed at. But I just don't see it being able to work any other way. Because I think that... Well, I mean, we could leave the loop here. Because we still want to fit the most running in the space that we can. And I think that doing a 20 by 30 is still practical. So... yeah, because I wanted to have Whitford facing the other way, because you're essentially where you are standing in this aisle is where the mountains are, and I wanted it to be the other way around. But that said, I think maybe there's something to be said for modeling the valleys and so forth that we're viewing the scene into. I could see that working. I think that'll work. Okay, so we're going to treat it like this. Yeah. And so then... on the other side, then that peninsula, then we don't have to worry about a duck under, and that's kind of a nice thing to not have to worry about. So then we've got our helix over here. And I'm not exactly sure how they'll line up, but that's okay, I don't exactly need to. So the helix... oh, well, So in this case, actually, I do need a duck under because the helix is facing that way. But can I reverse things and be happy? Like, can I just mirror image it? No, because I like the way it's oriented. So I think I'm going to leave it as is. But I might give myself some more running room by putting the... so we have this upper peninsula that's Whitford and the mountains. So the bottom peninsula underneath that is where the loop is. And I think that's acceptable. I think we could do that. So, the loop gets moved to here, underneath this peninsula. And that also gives us a little bit more running between Quinette and Gives us a bit more running between Quinette and Tech. And we might even move Tech further down. Well, no, we can't. It has to line up. And it's a peninsula where we don't really have something matching on the top. But I can figure that out. Because it'd be easy to just make the track follow the curve of the bottom peninsula if need be. That's not too much of a problem. But I like the fact that we could get these peninsulas to align. I think that's the big thing here, is that we've got the peninsulas aligning. We've got the major peninsulas aligning here. Here we've got the helix aligning. So, feedback. What do you think? Do my, first grade illustrations make sense? Do you see what we're talking about here? So, let me spell that out just to make sure that it's 100% clear, because it might not otherwise be. This is Quinette. This is one of the loaders. It's a reverse loop in real life as well as in the sim. We've got between Quinette and Tech, which is the other loader. I'm gonna have to Tech loader. We've got Murray, which has Murray is a picturesque river bridge crossing. It's also the site of the locomotive shops. So having those two things there is, they have there's plenty of room for those scenes to exist. Plenty of room to enjoy the sweeping nature of the train. I might move Tech as a peninsula out a ways, but I'm going to have to see how that maps out. I'm just trying to get the big visual elements in place. From Tech, we start our climb. We've got, this is Tumbler. A Tumbler, I'm going to put it in yellow, because Tumbler is our first, not the text. There we go. So I'm going to draw Tumbler in yellow because this is our first passing siding. Then we have a cut, we have the first tunnel, we have the second tunnel, bridge, and then we have Wolverine, which is our second passing siding area here. And I have a feeling that I've made that in too small space, so we might end up just doing a single tunnel on this edge up in the upper left, and then the bridge curves, and then all of this edge is Wolverine. Trying to get those long trains. I'd like to get 20-foot sidings if possible, and that is a tall order, but I think it's going to pay off. And yeah, I mean, well, you could just increase the room size. Again, I think 30 by 20 is already on the larger side of a basement. I want to be limiting myself. I don't want to just say the sky's the limit as far as space, because that defeats the fun of the challenge. I want this to be a real thing. I want this to seem like a layout somebody could actually build. From Wolverine, we go up the helix. From there, and Wolverine is... I don't like putting Wolverine on a crossover, though. But I'm going to have to work that on my own. From the helix, we then are on the upper shelf of the layout. We have this peninsula that could potentially fit Whitford here. And this is all going downhill. This is where, I believe this is where helpers get uncoupled and sent back over. So I like the sense that the helpers have to go through the helix. Then we have table, and that area is over here for that passage siding. The key is I want a 20-foot siding for Whitford, and you can't shortchange the sidings. Like, the train length has to fit in every single siding. So, fits in Whitford, then ideally the entire train can fit between Whitford and table. If it can't, I think then Whitford has to go, and it just has to be table. And something tells me Whitford's probably going to go. But for the sake of just lining up with what we were talking about earlier tonight, you could get a sense of how they would lay out if we have the room. From table, we're continuing in the flats region. We've got Parsnip River Bridge over here because that is a must. Then we come into the Y of the, which is our connection with Canadian National, to Cheetah with the waterfront scene along the edge here, and that peninsula so that we can look down the length of the train. We can look down the length of that coastline or river line. It looked really pretty in the sim. That's what we've got. And then lastly, just this staging area in the back. The staging area doesn't really have to be anything fancy. You could stage your trains on the layout, and then you don't have to access the staging area except for maybe derailments. But you don't have to assemble trains back there, because you could just have your train set in the yard, and then occasionally you're pulling out a CN freight that's passing, or you're pulling out empty hoppers that are going to get sent along the Tumbler Ridge line. So, that is the track plan in its very sketch phase. Next step is for me, I'm going to be taking this into AnyRail. I'm going to be really working it to make sure that physically it can fit into roughly a 20 by 30 foot space, and I might push the boundaries of that a bit one way or another, but 600 square feet seems reasonable. That's my goal. So, before I wrap tonight, one last shout out and call for any questions, comments. What did you think of tonight's stream as we're winding things down here for the night? Did you find this interesting? Did you enjoy looking at how I approach making a track plan? I'd really like to hear your feedback on this one, because it was different from the builds. Next month, we're going back to the builds. I think likely. So I thank those of you who voted either on Facebook or YouTube for what to do this week. That's why we're doing the Tumbler Ridge, because you guys voted for it. So next month, we're probably going to be going to the Valley City Street and Interurban, and that's going to be a build. We're going to be under the wires again, but this time for something very different in feel from what we've done tonight. So I like doing the builds, and that's going to be most of what we do, but I'm curious to know if you enjoyed this ride along, if you enjoyed the sketch section. Please, if you didn't like something, let me know. I can take criticism, and I want to make content that you find is interesting. I could read the phone book if I needed to. I could monologue pretty well, I think. So I want to make sure that what I'm monologuing is of interest to you. So please let me know what you think of an episode like this. Do you want to see me spend more time? Or if you're like, hey, I like the ride along, but can we have a route that actually looks more than just, more like, doesn't look like the moon? And that's fine too. Your feedback's appreciated, but hopefully you've started to see the process of taking what we've learned in the sim, what we've seen as scene possibilities, and translating that into a physical track plan. Next time we come back to this, which maybe next month, but I think it's I don't know if I'm going to be able to have room in the schedule to design the track plan this coming month. If not, it'll come back. But when we come back, the track plan's going to be set to go. I'm going to have figured it out, and we're going to start building it in Trainz with a Z to figure it out. Phoenix says, yes, loved all of it. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Phoenix. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you, those of you who are supporting the show through Patreon, patreon.com/theroundhouse, or even just by sharing the show if you're not able to support it financially. I appreciate that so much. And one last call for the night, greattrainlayouts.com. That's where all of my routes are going to be available for download right now. I'm still getting the site up and running, so not everything's up there, but the Conrail P&L secondary that we built a few months ago is available for download from there, and the other live stream builds, I'm hoping within the next month or two of this, so summer of 2022, I'm hoping to get those online soon, because I want you to be able to play with them and see what makes those layouts great. And hopefully as well, I'm hoping to do another What Makes This Layout Great edited episode in the next month or so. But thank you for tuning in. Let's see, RWS, yes, looking forward to the Trainz route is a unique way to design track plan. Did enjoy tonight's live video. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate you tuning in. Thank you, Virtual Railroader Academy, for tuning in. Appreciate you guys for joining me on my artistic endeavors. This is a lot of experimenting, but I really want to make sure that it's experimenting that's fun and engaging with you guys. Appreciate your feedback. GreatTrainLayouts.com, also where you can go to contact me. You can give me feedback there. But also, if, like Derpy's friend, you are interested in having your train layout simulated in Trainz with a Z, then I'd be happy to work with you on that. Reach out to me. I do take commissions. Actually, both of the last builds that we did, both the Conrail P&L secondary as well as the Gulf sub, were commissions, and I'm really happy to help you to make your vision a reality. Thank you for tuning in tonight, and that was Great Train Layouts Live. Have a good night or rest of your day whenever you're watching this, and I will see you next month. Cheers.